I'm very pleased to welcome Stephen James, who's teacher and co-founder of the Invicta National Academy, which was, funny enough, set up in 2020 as a result of COVID-19 to reconnect children with missed learning. I hope I've got that absolutely right, Stephen.
Yes, thank you, Nick. Cheers.
So I'm pretty sure you wouldn't have been surprised by what the former Children's Commissioner said?
No, and I think, you know, as you've already pointed out there, I think most people agree with kind of her sentiments in terms of, you know, schools staying open, keeping our children, you know, in front of teachers who are able to deliver high quality lessons. And I also think you're right as well to kind of give the government a little, you know, the benefit of the doubt in that kind of first round of closures, because we're all kind of, you know, finding our way through this situation. But what I can't forgive is, you know, when the evidence is in front of you that, you know, schools should stay open, they won't.
I suppose hindsight's a wonderful thing. I just got the feeling throughout the whole of COVID there was this herd instinct, you know, not to be confused with herd immunity, which was a topic, but there was this herd instinct that actually everyone else is doing it, we should do it. When she talked, she was very interesting because she also said in her statement that the government either were given the advice and didn't understand it, or were given the advice and ignored it. And I genuinely am coming to the view that they just followed herd instinct. I mean, your experience, what's the impact been of this colossal mistake?
I think, you know, herd experience, this kind of herd effect, I think is an interesting point. What I do think is actually they went for the easier option. Now, the easier option is to close all schools rather than think outside the box, to innovate, to start looking towards other solutions to delivering education as well. But the impact on children has been far-ranging in terms of social skills. You've already pointed out earlier in your programme about teachers having to teach young people how to brush their teeth, and those sorts of skills which you'd like to think parents would be delivering at home anyway. And what it does is it points out the real victims in all this are those children with special educational needs, those children who are already vulnerable in terms of on free school meals or may not have you know, a loving family environment to look after them. They're the people who you know, truly, I think, were damaged during this time. I think, again, those people who have got loving middle-class families who would have been reading them stories every night, who would have been sitting down diligently working through their home learning with them, they're not the ones who have got these kind of longer.
It's interesting, and I'll come on, if I may, Stephen, to the work that you're doing at Invicta. But I'm going to read out this message that's come in from Sue in West Sussex, and see if you recognise this, or maybe you could add to the list. She says, "Hi Nick, my daughter is a primary school teacher with 15 years teaching experience. She is struggling with this year's reception intake. Some of them are not properly toilet trained and generally struggle with basics like sitting on the floor at story time and other things children of their age are normally able to cope with. She feels they missed out on various aspects of their development when they were small during the lockdowns, and teachers like my daughter are now experiencing the consequences."
Schools are often kind of placed in this role of fixing all of society's ills.
Quite.
And actually, a lot of the time, I do think parents need to take a closer look at themselves and a look in the mirror. If you're sending your child to school and they're unable to use the toilet correctly, unable to wash their hands, unable to say please and thank you, use a knife and fork, I think it's very easy to blame other things for where you're lacking, maybe as a parent, especially those children in reception. They were maybe born 3 years ago, so they've lived through COVID. But it's not the school's fault that they're, or lockdown's fault that they're unable to do those things.
Because they could have been dealt with at home. So what do you think? I'm getting into an area that you may not have any expertise on, but what is it? Is it just the fact that where there is a poor family dynamic in place, it was inevitable, as Anne, the former commissioner is talking about, Children's Commissioner, that the parenting of these kids was going to be worse, and as a consequence we get these decisions?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, they're the children who have, as I said, been damaged the most, and they're the ones that we need to be investing in now to help them catch up with their peers. So actually, in primary school, what they're seeing now in terms of the data, and I think the Education Endowment Foundation have produced some stuff about years 3 and 4 and Key Stage 1, saying actually, well, the academic impact hasn't been that great a deal, because guess what? Children are quite resilient, and they bounce back. And we need to kind of appreciate that a little bit more as well with our young people. They don't need to be wrapped in cotton wool. We were talking earlier about personal responsibility and people taking responsibility for their actions. That's important for children too. They need to take responsibility for their own actions, take risks, and enjoy themselves as young people as well, because they are resilient. And you always have the other aspects with those older children when you're looking at kind of GCSEs, A levels. Mental health, well-being, a very important area now, and we're seeing lots of young people, not being able to cope as much as they were able to. And I think again, it's important we address that, because ultimately, a happy, outgoing young person who's got a caring family, caring school around them will do well always. And as much as our current education secretary has kind of pointed out in terms of actually, your time in school doesn't define who you are in later life. It helps guide you along.
Exactly.
And we're not victims.
Let me just ask you, as I said in the introduction to you, Stephen, you set up Invicta National Academy, principally as a result of COVID-19, but you define it as reconnecting children with mislearning. You therefore must have a very clear picture of both what the mislearning is and the impact it has on children. What sort of age groups, for example, are you dealing with and finding it most profound?
Well, I think it's probably important to point out, so Invicta was of its time in terms of during COVID, because I think, the best place for children is in front of a teacher, face-to-face, in person. But what we were seeing at the time, and the reason for setting it up, was because we looked at private education and independent schools, and schools closed on the Friday. They were opened again on the Monday in terms of online lessons, Zoom lessons, teachers there available to ask questions and interact with their students. We wanted that for state schools, because what we were seeing was some schools just sending home a word search, a book. Oh, watch this YouTube video and, that's your lesson for the day. And quite frankly, that's not good enough. And what we wanted to do was fill that space. So we were offering live lessons from year 1 all the way up to year 11 to fill in those core subjects, being, reading, writing, and arithmetic, which are so crucial to be able to access all areas of the curriculum. So, we like to think that we've added some values, and children have gone back to school to have face-to-face learning, and they're not as far behind as they would have been without us.
Listen, Stephen, thank you very much for joining us and shedding some light on what I think is a really complex issue that we're going to be paying a price for many years. Stephen James, teacher and co-founder of the Invicta National Academy.